The topic today is how can we be better leaders, or even more precisely, how can we be better people? And we would hope that good people and good leaders are more or less the same, but if we look at some successful leaders, they are not really very good people sometimes. So let me just talk about some examples. Who knows that person? Not too many, which I think shows the age of the ones that know him, because he used to be the most famous management leader of his time, Jack Welch, the CEO. He was the star for, I don't know, 20 years. And he was the most widely admired business leader. But if we compare him with this person, I'm not asking who knows that, because everybody knows him. The Jack Welch empire, after he left, it more or less shrunk, not to say fell partly apart, because he had this sort of accounting where he was basically forcing his accountants to, I'm not saying cook in the books, but make his predictions come true. And he had another principle, up or out, which means if you weren't promoted after a year, you were fired, which led to a very bad corporate culture. And if we look at Apple compared to GE stock price is going down, the company is splitting itself into pieces, whereas Apple, after Steve Jobs passed away, was reaching really the full climax and becoming the most valuable company. So it seems Steve Jobs is doing something right. And also, both of them are smiling here. And my goal is to measure how happiness and business success are correlated and how we can create a corporate culture of happiness. And when I'm telling those things in the US, I always have to make the case that happiness is actually good for business. Because I have heard many times, unfortunately, I do not care about happiness. I care about making money. And I have a colleague, and I'm not mentioning his name, and he said, you know what's the coolest thing? $2 million. It wasn't research, it wasn't papers, it wasn't making the world a better place, it was bringing in the grants of $2 million. And I have to say, I have been in the US for a very long time, but that particular aspect of super capitalist American culture I will never get. And with my Swiss, more egalitarian background, I think just having a happy culture is key, because as we can read here, and those points are all very well researched, if you are happy, you are more creative. We have done some of that research ourselves, using our AI tools to measure whether happy people are really more creative and whether they are willing to take more risks, willing to have wilder ideas, because they have a positive corporate culture, which leads to higher motivation. And in the end, we also get what the American CEO wants, higher revenue. So in this presentation, in this talk, I will introduce, those are the points I was just mentioning. Now I'm learning that this monitor and this monitor is not reflecting 100% the same. I hope you saw it while I was already talking before, or not. So in my presentation, I will cover how we can get more creative, happier organizations based on something that I have been researching for the last 20 years, which I call swarm creativity. When I started doing this sort of research 20 years ago, the common wisdom was still that you had the genius in their little cubicle and they would crank out great ideas. The truth is extremely different. as we will hear here, and as by now has become common wisdom. The question how we can make organizations more creative, I have been trying to answer for the last 20 years, and my most recent book, and so I'm continuing Juan's sales pitch for my latest book, Happy Metrics, is basically using AI based on how people behave, talk, move their bodies, interact with each other, to measure what makes them happy or not so happy, to increase happiness. It is something I call virtual mirroring, and it basically means when we use our tools to measure happiness. And for example, this watch here looks like a smartwatch, because it is a smartwatch, but it runs an app which has a machine learning model which is being executed on AWS server based on my heart rate, my speech energy, the accelerometer of how I move my hands, and then it measures my happiness. It also measures that right now I'm a bit stressed and nervous, and so if I were with Juan or with Isabel, it would also tell me whether they make me happy or unhappy. So you really get input on your surroundings to change for the better, and that's basically my recipe of how we can create happy organizations. Now, while I talk about happiness, the point is, it's not just happiness. Just being happy will not get you anywhere. You can have sex and drugs and rock and roll, and then you will take your drugs and you will die at 40 because of boredom. And what I have experienced, and it has really become my main credo, no pain, no gain. And I'm not sure whether any of you has read the biography of Elon Musk that just came out. It's a fascinating read. I can recommend it to everybody. He is all full of pain. And honestly, I'm not sure I would want to work in his companies, because he gets his energy from his anger, and then his employees, they are full of fear of him, and he fires them and he abuses them verbally. So it's not a nice environment, but he gets things done. And what I'm trying to do in my work, optimizing happiness, and that means injecting the smallest amount of pain to reach the goal. And I call that an emotional roller coaster. And I will show you many examples where we have looked at those Zoom conferences that Juan Garbajosa was mentioning, and looked at the facial expressions of the people using AI to measure emotions, and compare that with the quality of the results. And what we found is that just smiling gladly, people get very bored. But if you shock and frighten occasionally, and if you inject pain, then the result will be much better. And I'm saying that now also in my classes that I teach. I will always say, I will give you a lot of pain, but in the end, you will do very well. And it's actually a very good start, because that means I can put a lot of pressure on them. It's a bit the same trick as Elon Musk is using, but I'm trying to make it not as painful as Elon Musk, to get highest possible performance. And so it's basically measuring emotions and instilling some pain, but only in smaller doses, if possible. So what I'm going to talk today, it's based off those many books that I have written over the last 20 years. So it's all extremely well documented. It is written up in a few hundred papers, and there is a very large group of people, Juan will find his name there, and also some other students that I have had the pleasure to work with from Universidad Politecnica, like Luis de la Cal and Alvaro Gil, that are really great contributors, but we are all basically pursuing the same goal of creating a happy, creative environment and what I call collaborative innovation networks. So the question is, how can we all work together to become collectively creative, have a shared creativity? In my presentation, I will first talk about how we use our technologies to measure personality characteristics, to measure emotions, to measure personal values. It turns out the way how I move my body, the way how you move your body, will not just tell how happy or unhappy you are, it will also tell whether you like me or not, whether you are altruistic, whether you are egoistic, whether you think Donald Trump is great, meaning you are a traditionalist, an ultra-patriot, whether you think, I don't know what, Greta Thunberg is great. So your body gives away a lot of things. And by the way, if you at any point violently disagree with what I'm saying, feel free to interrupt me at any time. Because the question that always comes up, privacy. And also because in our research we have applied that to large groups of people. And we have done, you might have heard of Cambridge Analytica, which was analyzing Facebook to basically allow Mr. Trump to show manipulative ads. And we did similar things, but with one big difference, which is the virtual mirror. That means I never, and some marketing people were asking me whether I was willing to give my technologies, but no, we are not doing that. We only give it back to the single individual. And that means you get the input, how you can change. Now, our software in my company, Galaxy Advisors, is looking at creativity, collaborative innovation networks, and employee happiness and well-being, but the enterprise only gets aggregated information. That means, for example, when a team is smaller than 10, we will not give the values, and the individual person, they get their own information. So first thing is using AI to measure your personality characteristics and your moral values. The second part of my talk will be about how you will find those key, influential, the most creative people, because everybody wants to be important. And getting recognition will make you happy. And it will encourage you to even more invest yourself. And that's what our system does. It will find the most influential people, the most creative people, and they will get that recognition, which will encourage them. And we also do that on the organizational level by finding the hidden coins, the creative teams that are very frequently overlooked, that do not get recognition. We are using a science called social network analysis. This is what I started 20 years ago when I got, at that time I was the head of e-business for Deloitte Consulting, and then I got bored, and at 42 I decided I would early retire, go back to MIT, become a research scientist and get a huge pay cut and have much more fun. I was allowed to take the mailbox of Deloitte, of my groups there, and analyze it, and finding those creative innovation networks. So that's how we started, looking at email, where also everybody says this is crazy, it will never work. Well, it worked, and today everybody is doing it. And in the end, putting together all those pieces, how can we put virtual mirroring into place, which basically means showing each of you who you are and what makes you happy or not so happy, to become even happier and more creative. So let me start by looking at emotions. And the easiest way to find emotions, to measure emotions, and I have done that many times in my classes, would be to put a webcam here that shows, will capture your faces, and then I will get the average, and it will tell me whether I have been able to provoke a little bit of an emotional roller coaster or not. If you are just smiling, that's second best. Looking unhappy, of course, is worst. But shocking and provoking you occasionally and measuring aggregated emotions, we have done that many times. In theatrical performances, in jazz concerts, and in many team settings, and I will mention those. There is many emotion frameworks that are popular. We are using a very simple one that a psychologist named Paul Ekman introduced a long time ago, which distinguishes between fear, angry, sad, happy, disgust, and surprise. And we measure those emotions in many different ways. We measure them from text. We are using something like ChatGPT. It's called BERT, or DistillBERT. It's basically a much simpler version that will extract emotions from text. It will also, and that's our own invention, extract emotions from the way how quickly respond to email. This is one of what I call the honest signals. The faster everybody responds to a person, the more they respect him. For example, if Elon Musk would send me an email, I might respond to him 20 seconds later. Unfortunately, he will never send me an email. But the speed of response that somebody gets is a very good proxy for the respect. And the speed with which a person responds to all emails is a very good proxy for the passion of a person. And there is many more of those, and I will mention them later. And they together will allow me to just compute your emotions and the emotions of teams based on structural email behavior. How much the network structure changes over time, and how much of a sender or a receiver you are, and how quickly you respond. And then, of course, we also do the text. But sometimes, particularly, we also have done a lot of projects with banks. They don't like to give us the text. They are still interested in emotions, and so we can compute that just from using a machine learning model which has been trained with emotions extracted from text, just from structural information, which is much less security critical. But so this is the first thing we do. The next one is we have a cheap webcam that is pointed to the faces of people, and then we can compute emotions by just using machine learning. Same algorithm that distinguishes between a cat or a dog picture will distinguish between a happy face or a sad face. Next thing, and that's harder, speech energy. The way how I talk, whether I'm very slowly and falling asleep, or whether I'm full of energy. And that's also, machine learning can do that. Audio analysis is a big area, and it's harder than video, but it's also quite well researched. And then we also look at body language. And that's the happy meter I was mentioning. When we started, we used our own hardware. That was like 6 years ago. But in the meantime, Apple brought out the Apple Watch, and there's a lot of Android watches, and then there is all those fitness trackers. So we can just use out-of-the-box hardware and then take the body signals with the sensors from the watch and put them into the model, and then compute the emotions. And then, and this is, I think, by far the coolest system, we use plants. We measure the happiness of basil, tomato, salad, and so on. How can we do that? We look at the brain waves of plants. Now, this all sounds very provocative, and when I first presented that at MIT 2 years ago, but I'm used to that by now, they said, you are crazy, this will never work. But what we are really measuring is basically the potential difference between the leaf and the root. And the plant is a great movement sensor. So we take the electric discharge of the body, and then we basically just measure how your body moves, and then you can filter out who is in a room, and you can filter out what is emotion. We use an out-of-the-box hardware called the Plant Spiker box, and two students from UPM, Alvaro and Luis, they have worked a lot on making machine learning models for the voltage differentials that we got from the Plant Spiker box. So let me now talk a little bit about the tools that we have built. The first one, the Happy Meter. This just shows you my Google Pixel Watch and the app that is running here. It makes a prediction, and if you put on an Android Wear Watch or an Apple Watch, and those are the only two that are currently supported, you can try it out. It's freely available on both app stores and also from our website, happymeter.org. And you can retrain it. So if the predictions are wrong, then you can change it and update the machine learning model, and then it will become customized and become Isabel's or Juan's personalized happiness model. What we have done many experiments. This is an experiment we did in a German bank, where we had 22 people wearing the watch, out of which 11 got feedback and 11 did not. And what we found, the ones that got feedback, they became happier. Measuring happiness makes happier. In the beginning, they didn't believe it, but again, virtual mirroring works. Now, the other thing, no pain, no gain. So, in that innovation center of the bank, they were using Scrum, and when they had more happiness, they were also more stressed. So, you have to increase the stress level, and Elon Musk is a master in that, and he's having what he calls surges, where he creates artificial pain, artificial fear by being extremely angry and screaming and yelling at people. Now, I try to do those things without screaming and yelling, which perhaps also explains why my company has 4 employees and his has 120,000. So, injecting a lot of fear and anger is, it gets things moving. But it's painful for everybody involved. So, the Happy Meter is one way, and we have done interesting experiments. I got an executive committee of one of the leading telecom companies, actually by far the biggest in Switzerland, to wear the watches during their meeting, and then you can really see what makes them happy and what makes them unhappy. I'm not saying who were the speakers, but you can see that some speakers made them very happy and others made them unhappy, and you can also see that the food was really bad. So just wearing the watch will tell you very simple things. Another experiment was using the plants as biosensors with jazz musicians, and that was a jazz festival where we, for 2 times in 2 years, the students were wearing the Happy Meter, but they were also having plants. And what we could show is that the plant was measuring the happiness of the musicians and the audience using machine learning models. Another experiment, dancing with the plants, is you have, this is now slightly esoteric, it's called eurythmy, which is sort of a dance invented by a German philosopher named Rudolf Steiner, but we had some sponsors and they wanted us to do that eurythmy analysis, and Luis and Alvaro are now working on that project. It's basically, you have somebody who is doing eurythmic movements while focusing on salads. and tomatoes, and also beans. And then our spiker box is measuring whether plants that get that interaction from the humans respond differently, and the answer is yes. So this here is how it looks. So here you have Hans, and he's doing his rhythmic movements, and you see the setting with the laptop of Moritz or Luis or Alvaro, and they are collecting the voltage differentials of the salad, or the beans in this case, comparing control plants, where there was nobody interacting, with the beans or the salad where Hans was interacting. And you can recognize that. So it seems there is something, but this is very early research. Anyway, measuring emotions. And we have many ways of measuring emotions, but we can also look at other things inside groups. And one of the key things when you are in a community, you want to be with people that share your same values, and that's what I call the tribes. And we have created some tribal systems that are like personas in software engineering that will group together people with similar interests and similar values. This is one of my systems where it was inspired by Donald Trump. Make America great again, and I call them the fatherlanders. The fatherland and tradition and authority, that's what they believe in. We have the others, the Elon Musks, the nerds, and then we have the Nelson Mandelas and Dalai Lamas and the Buddhists, they are the spiritualists, and then we have the Greta Thunbergs. And we can figure out those tribes by looking at emotions and how people change with response to external input. For example, when you watch a video of Donald Trump giving the speech about the wall, then if you look disgusted, you might be a nerd or a tree hugger, and if you look happily thrilled, you will be a fatherlander. So our system can actually figure out your moral values. And I mean, the point is that from the outside, it's really hard. I think some of you might know this person, Sam Bankman-Fried, crypto trader. He was promoting how altruistic he is. In the end, it turns out he is not very altruistic. This year, nobody knows him. He's a German sergeant in the Second World War who saved hundreds and hundreds of Jews and got killed in the end by the Nazis themselves. But just from looking at the picture, you couldn't tell. But looking at the way how you respond, looking at the words that you use in your text, we can figure out. And I have my other favorite system. So we have tree huggers, fatherlanders, and so on. And I have really defined those personas for the teamwork. We have the bees, the creative bees. We have hardworking and highly competitive ants. And then we have the selfish leeches. They are just sucking others, and they are claiming all the credit, even if they didn't do any work. And my belief, bees. You need the bees in the team, and it's actually a mix of bees and ants. Leeches are no good. And the point is, when I show those things in a virtual mirroring way to the students, they will change their behavior. Knowing nobody wants to be a leech. And nobody else will know, but you will know, and that will change your behavior. And if you know that you are a bee, that will encourage you, and it will become even more like a bee. We are using some morality frameworks that are very well established in research, in psychology and sociology. One is called the Big Five FFI inventory that measures your openness, your conscientiousness, your extroversion, your neuroticism, and your agreeability. Then we measure, it's called the Height moral framework, whether you are caring or whether you are just a believer in authority and tradition. We use the Schwartz value system, which shows whether you are a universalist or you are an egoist. And then we use something called DOSPERT, which is a risk-taking framework that will tell whether you tend to take, in DOSPERT they are called ethical risks, social risks, and health risks. An ethical risk means you cheat. And when you are a cryptocurrency trader, Sam Bankman-Fried, you take ethical risks because in the end he lost face. Social risk means that's what that German army sergeant took. He was violating norms of society and he paid a huge price because they shot him. So are you willing to take social risks? It turns out Elon Musk was also willing to take social risks. It also turns out occasionally he is willing to take ethical risks, which means good leaders and good people sometimes is not 100% the same. To be a good leader, sometimes you need to stretch the law a little bit to the advantage of your own company. And that's why I think the ethical aspect is very important. So this is a result from a project with Juan and Alvaro, where we measured in a class that Juan was teaching how much the students are bees, ants, or leeches. And it turns out the more bees you have in a team, the better the team performance. Unfortunately, the bee itself doesn't get the reward. There was no correlation between individual grades and being a bee. And that's the same as with that German sergeant in the Second World War. He was the biggest bee, he was saving hundreds of Jews. And they shot him. So being a bee is great for the company, but it might not be great for you. And that's why I'm building those systems, to increase the reputation or the opportunities for bees to get the reward. Another way is for measuring ethical values. Here we have measured the bee-ness from the words they were using in the transcripts that Alvaro computed from the team session that Juan was recording. But you can also watch a movie. If it's a shocking movie, and you can try that out for yourself at facerecognition.galaxyadvisors.com, it will tell you who you are. How much of an ethical, unethical, altruistic, non-altruistic, open to experience, or neurotic, and so on, person you are. We have built that system by getting ground truth from the surveys that people filled out, and then we trained a machine learning model, and now you can just watch the video and then you will know who you are. So this basically shows that just the way how you move your face, how you smile, will tell who you are. So that is the foundation for computing the bees. And I think I need to speed up a little bit. This is our original framework to compute honest signals of individual people based on the way how they email with each other. Strong leadership means you bombard others with emails, but over time it needs to be balanced. Rotating leadership means that it's always other people that assume that role, and they need to be responsive, which I already explained how important that is. So all of those things, including the content, where you look at your emotions in the text, and also how much you introduce new words that are being picked up by others. I call that a shared context. Because that will show that you are the next bee, the person with crazy ideas. So all of those things, you can get them from email, you can get them from all of the input sources that I mentioned in the slide before, looking at the face, looking at the body language, and measure how influential you are. This here is just some systems we built that will take email as input and compute how caring you are, how much of a bee or an ant you are, how happy you are over time. This is all done fully automatical. And what we now want is groups of bees, and groups of bees are creative swarms, or what I call collaborative innovation networks. And here I always like to tell the story of my own experience in 1991 when I came to MIT the first time as a postdoc. I was working on a system called CyberMap, which was like a web browser, but the web didn't exist in 1991. But I wrote that paper, I got it accepted at the conference, and I flew to San Antonio. I was dragging my Mac there to demo my system, and then this person came. And we had a discussion about this person just before the talk. This is Tim Berners-Lee, the creator of the web. Only at that time, nobody knew who he was. He was a manager at CERN in Geneva, and I was Swiss. I'm still Swiss. And so he figured out I would help him. And one Swiss person helps another person, although of course he's British, but he was working in Switzerland. And he said that he had also written a paper about a system called the World Wide Web, which was rejected because the program committee thought that that paper would never succeed and had no scientific merit. And what he did, he printed out hundreds of papers, put them in his suitcase, and brought them to San Antonio, and then he went from one person to the other and tried to convince them to join his initiative. Now, I was very happy to allow him to put flyers of his system on my desk, but I didn't want to join his initiative because I thought it had no scientific merit and would never succeed. However, my boss was much smarter. David Clark, the head of the Internet Engineering Task Force, he invited Tim to come to our group, and there Tim started the World Wide Web Consortium, and he recruited other PhD students and postdocs to his group, and that was his COIN, his Collaborative Innovation Network. And then he used the MIT as a sounding board, and he created the World Wide Web Consortium, and that was hundreds of people, and they were basically spreading the greatness of the idea and recruiting the rest of the world, and that was the interest network. And for me, that's how all those creative ideas spread. And the question then is, what's that makes Tim different? And that's inspired by the bee, the waggle dance, touching other people. Elon Musk is touching other people, Tim Berners-Lee has been touching many people, super passionate, and he was basically following that step here. You have a crazy idea that becomes taken up by a coin, it becomes a learning network, and then in the end, everybody takes it up. The bee metaphor here works really well. You have a strong leader, you have the coin where people take turns, you have the learning network where bees touch each other with the waggle dance, and then when they swarm, they follow the hormones, the pheromones, to the new goal. So this is how it works. The question, how can we do that for humans? And my answer, create entanglement. What is entanglement? It's basically synchronicity. That means the more we start mirroring each other's body language, the better the coin will be. And so this is one entangled team, and it will create another entangled team. They will take up the same idea and will also be synchronized. And this was the inspiration. And then we built such systems which do the same. So if I would take your picture and I would run our system, I would see how much the body language is synchronized, and then I would find whether you are a coin or not. We can do the same in email, and then we will find the communities synchronized through sending and exchanging emails synchronously. So that's how we build the coins, and now I come to the last point, and that's the virtual mirroring, where we have basically a feedback of our own communication behavior to create a positive environment. And we are using a framework called PERMA, P for positivity, E for engagement or being in flow, R for relationships, M for having meaning, and A for getting accomplishment or achievement or getting recognition. And this has been invented by two very famous positive psychologists, Martin Seligman and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Csikszentmihalyi also invented the concept of flow. And with our tools, we will show you how far you are with PERMA and what you can do to get even more PERMA. Now I'm running out a little bit of time, and so I will not go. I was prepared to show you my own PERMA and where I'm running short and what Juan would have to do to make me a bit happier. I mean, it's basically the things that you saw before, being very responsive and being nurturing and picking up my ideas and getting synchronized. This here is an example of a project we did where also some students from UPM are involved at MIT, where we had 90 students in 22 teams for 5 days, and we were measuring their emotions every day using all our tools. The face, the body, the voice, the text, and the plant. And then what you can see here is that PERMA is going up. It's basically, here we have only 3 days. So the red is the first day and green is the last day. And you see that basically more or less all of them are getting higher and higher. We were also measuring the facial emotions in, this is a course I'm teaching, the coins course. And this was basically showing, or this is how I discovered that emotional roller coaster is much better than blissful happiness. Because the more the emotions go up and down, the higher the performance of the students. Just only being happy doesn't help you at all. So create emotional roller coasters. We also build a dashboard that is basically creating those. And we also have an app which you can try out. It's also right now freely available, sc.galaxyadvisors.com, the social compass. It will measure PERMA and it will show you where you are deficient, based on your LinkedIn or based on your WhatsApp or based on your email. It's basically just like Gmail, but instead of taking your text, it will take your honest signals, all the signals I have been introducing. And that is a screenshot of how it looks. This is an experiment we did with a very big company where we were measuring their honest signals. It was 90,000 employees, and they are outsourcing company that works with 220 big customers, out of which 20 were using our system. So they had teams of 50 to 200 people that were getting the virtual mirror, and they measured customer satisfaction with Net Promoter Score, which basically is a simple question. You ask the customer, how likely are you to recommend me to a friend? And then if you say yes, you are a promoter, and if you say no, you are a detractor, on a score from 0 to 10. And what we found, and so those were the things that we measured and mirrored and showed them when they were not well communicating. The customers that got the virtual mirroring feedback, which is actually not the customers got the feedback, but the people at the company, they were 17% happier than the others, which is another proof that knowing your happiness and what is efficient will actually increase your happiness and might make you a better person or a better leader. Thank you very much.